ready.
3, 2, 1. Welcome back to another episode of Shit That Goes on Our Heads. I'm G-Rex with my partner, Dirty Skittles, and our famous guest, Regent. Welcome, Regent.
Hello. Hey. How are you all? I'm so glad to be here and with two of my favorite people. So this is just awesome.
Excited.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I'm having like a little bit of a fangirl moment, I have to tell you.
Well, honey, have it. I need autographs later, and photos are $10 a pop.
Love it.
Is this the same fangirl you had with Viv and Cecile also?
Yeah. And I got to make a little money for good shoes too. So send it away.
I heard you need some new hats and new shoes. So
yeah, I need it all. I need a Botox facelift. I need these rubber bands and duct tape are about to fall forward, and we're all in trouble.
We just see one snap, and it just like
bam, off it goes. Oh my gosh.
Toupee and everything.
Yes. I am so glad to be able to be here with you today because there is a subject really that weighs on my heart, and it's about having really good, deep conversations with people. It's about having conversations with our friends and our loved ones and people that we work with and people that sometimes we want to have in our lives and they don't always want to have us in our lives. And it's about a time to either have those conversations or sometimes even, I'm going to tell you, let the conversation go. I mean, you have to find that space in your life to say, you know what, I'm okay with letting the conversation go. But I want to focus today on those conversations that we want to have, those conversations that are so good and rich and sometimes not always easy to talk about,
Yeah.
And I'm so happy. Like the shit that goes on in our heads literally is all wrapped around conversations, emotional intelligence, emotional capital that comes into these conversations, and really the fear that holds us back from having them.
Right. Yeah. And just the impact it has on your mental health, holding that shit back.
God.
I know.
The shit that goes on, the shit that goes on in our head. So, the stuff that holds us back from conversations. I always think about what's the other person going to say? How are they going to react? Will I lose a friend? Am I going to be loved by my family when I have these conversations? All of that. And what I find in conversations, some of those hardest ones are sometimes the easiest ones that we don't have and we should have had. I read a book about 14 years ago from Susan Scott. It's called Fierce Conversations. And if you download that book or you get a paper copy of that book, it is one of the most phenomenal books. It's a little older. It's been around for a while. But I will tell you, if you haven't read it, and if you read it, reread it again. Mine is tattered and torn and highlighted and dog-eared and underlined. And that's the sign of a good book to me. You know what I'm talking about? Just a real good, juicy book.
Yeah. This reminds me of when we first started, G-Rex and I would record with our friends and our family first. And I think just subconsciously we were doing it because we could be vulnerable with those people and not be scared to just kind of be ourselves and dive into something new. But what I discovered in that was surprisingly, these friends that I've had for many years, I never had deep conversations with. Like we never talked about life and things that really matter to them and resonate with them as a person. And I just thought that's so interesting because I've known them for years.
I love that you say that. Fierce Conversations talks about, Susan says in her book that there's mineral rights. And she said, so many conversations are like surface level. We go in with feedback. We go at surface level. We are so scared to move past the deeper resonating issues that we'll go surface. And she's like, if you want to go deep, and Susan, I consider Susan a personal friend of mine. I've keynoted for her and I've spoke with her personally. She's a fun lady. I got to give her some really big kudos. But she said, when you mine deep in conversations, mineral rights is what she calls it. And you can read about that in the book. But she said, get below the surface. And I think digging down deep, it's having those deeper conversations that, like what you just said, really matter. They're not always easy. They're not always ones that we want to have, but they're ones that we know that we need to have. She calls them mukitas, that which everyone knows but no one speaks about. It's the elephant in the room, if you will. It's the big, elephant. And when you tell people, don't think about the elephant in the room, well, what are you thinking about right now?
Right.
Elephant. It's that big elephant that's left a turd in your proverbial universe. And it's like, are you going to take care of this or not? And sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. My dad used to say that, and he's no longer here, but he would call it, we would have conversations of lipstick on a pig. He said, eventually that lipstick wears off and you're just stuck with a pig, And I'm like, I'm tired of being stuck with all these pigs. I don't know what to do with them. I'm like, how many pigs can one herd? I'm not a shepherd. I'm not a farmer. I don't want
a lot of bacon, man. A lot of bacon.
It is a lot of bacon. And I mean, I love bacon, but not like that,
It's the turd bacon. Nobody wants it.
It's the turd bacon. Nobody wants it.
Right.
In 2014, I got gifted a book. I went to an ATD conference and Fierce Conversations was there and Susan was actually there. And ATD is Association of Training and Development, if you don't know what that acronym means. And a lot of trainers go to it from around the world. And sometimes they have really great classes and sometimes they have some really boring stuff. And I saw Fierce Conversations on the title and I was like, boo, I got to sign up for this. It's a bunch of cat scratching. Let's see some blood on the wall. I'm thinking WWF wrestling here is going to go on. And I walk into this room and I am flabbergasted at just the presentation and what they say. I'm not going to give Susan's, good juice away from what's in the book. I want to give her, kudos. Because she says, while no single conversation is guaranteed to change the trajectory of a career, a company, or a relationship or a life, any single conversation can. And I think that's the most powerful statement when I think about it. I'm like, any single conversation can. I think of sliding door moments. I'm like, think of a movie, The Matrix, those sliding door moments, whether you get on the train or you get off the train and you meet your person that you love in your life or you don't meet them. Like, what happens if you don't have the conversation? But what happens if you do have the conversation and it turns out really well? I mean, those are the phenomenal things.
Yeah.
It's kind of like how this podcast started, right? It was a conversation. It was more laughing than anything else, but it was a conversation. And every subsequent conversation we've had since the beginning, I learned so much. And I'm so glad that we asked the questions and we let our guests talk and we interject questions that we want to know. And I'm a richer person because of it. Mm-hmm. And I have more self-help books than I've ever had in my entire life.
Right. I'm telling you, this is a great self-help book. It's got some instructional design in there that asks you some questions. I picked up that book and I took it home. And I was in at that time, that was like 2014, 2015, the years that escape me. I'm a little grayer than I was in my beard and in this hair. But I took that book home and I left that class changed. I hadn't read her book yet, but I literally left the class changed because they gave some tips and tricks and tools. And I was like, damn, this is common sense, right? Mm-hmm. It's common sense to have a good conversation, but our common sense gets in our way. I think about many times when I shouldn't have salted my baked potato. My common sense tells me don't salt it that much, or take your fat butt to the gym, Regent. Your common sense tells you get your butt to the gym. And common sense also tells us to have those conversations and we ignore them. I am a PCC coach, which is a professional certified coach with ICF. And I never come to these things trying to preach at people. I try to talk with people and be an awakener, because just as much as I believe in Fierce, I also have to live it every day. Does that make sense? I have to drink my own champagne, Dr. Pepper, coffee, whatever your drink of choice is. But it's hard sometimes being a human in the world. It's hard. I went home and I took that book home, and I'm going to get vulnerable with you. I was in a 14-year relationship, probably 4 years too long in that relationship. Yeah. And though I love this person fanatically before, we hit some bumps and roads in our life. They couldn't have come at a more poignant time. Let me get my tongue wrapped around my brain there. And I went home on that plane and I dog-eared pages. I highlighted stuff. I underlined things. I put exclamation points between things. You know, what you do to a really good, juicy book. And I got home and I put that book down on the counter. And about 2 days later, I was looking for my book in my house and I couldn't find that book anywhere. It was gone, literally gone. The book was gone. I found the book later in my bedroom on my nightstand, but it was on my partner's nightstand. And I opened it up and all the dog ears were gone. All the highlights were gone. All the exclamation points that I put in there were gone from the book. And I'm like, God, are you speaking to me? Like, what the hell happened to my book? And probably an hour later, I get a text message from the person I was in this relationship with, and things weren't going so hot. Why did you write all in my book and highlight it and dog ear it and do all these things to the book? Crazy thing is, he was working for Starbucks and Fierce is out of Seattle, Washington. That's where Susan lives. We were reading the same damn book at the same darn time. I got his book and he got my book. Is that not crazy? So when you think that fate or destiny or divine intervention doesn't occur, sometimes that shit happens.
Yeah.
And the shit that goes on in our head, like I love the title, is the shit that we need to have conversations about. And I said, I guess I'm reading the same book that you are. He worked at Starbucks. I was working at a company at that time in human capital management, and we were reading the same damn book.
So crazy.
Me too was the fierce conversation that we need to have. We had that conversation, and though it was really tough and it was hard, and we talked about things that were probably never fathomable before in 14 years. We were both reading that same book. We were saying things like, oh, I hate you. Don't look at me. Even when he looked at me, I was like, don't look at me. And he looked at me and I was saying it's the same thing. And we were being really ugly with one another because of the fear and the resentment and the animosity, the things that were going on in our relationship. But we both decided that we really needed to have this really good, fierce conversation. I want to remind you, while no single conversation is guaranteed to change the trajectory of a career, a company, a relationship, or a life, any single conversation can. And it did. That's the power. We found a way to have a really damn good conversation. Our relationship ended, but we could have spent 2 more years in the 4 years that we shouldn't have. And we left instead of saying like, I hate you and I don't like you and get out of my face, to this is right for us. And I've loved you and I still love you. And I will always love you. And that's what changed the conversation. There were a lot of stuff that happened in between. Let me tell you, it wasn't glamorous. It was not anything really pretty, but it wasn't like we threw grenades at each other anymore. We really listened to what the book had to say, and we started really listening to people. Susan says in her book, let silence do the heavy lifting. She goes, it's the most important part of the conversation in between the words. And I was like, we should have had this conversation years ago. And even when I think about it now, it chokes me up because that's the power of really deep and good communication is when you have those.
Yeah.
And though we're several degrees of separation between us and our lives have moved different trajectories in our life, those conversations allowed us to get out of the depths of where we were and move forward. It was very freeing. And so I look at that and I said, God, I wonder if I had all these conversations, if I just applied some fierceness to most of the conversations that I was scared of having, could it really change? Could it change the trajectory? And I'm telling you, from 2014 until 2024 today, it has. It's made a huge difference.
That's awesome.
It's emotionally freeing, right? Because it's not just work conversations. It's personal conversations. It's people at the speedway, right? It's those conversations. And communication is key. You know, learning how to open up. And when I finally was able to open up about my own shit that I was going through, and as terrified as I was, it opened doors for people that they didn't know they could open, right? People reached out to me and thanked me profusely because now they didn't feel so alone in their own journey. And that's really like where the podcast stemmed from is I wanted to share my story, but I wanted to share it with my best friend.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
and laugh about it. Because, okay, depression's not funny, but we have to laugh at some of the shit, right? Because if you're not laughing, you're dying.
I think also, like, besides having that conversation with other people, like when I'm hearing you talk, Regent, I'm also thinking of like the moments in my life that changed because I had that conversation.
Yeah.
But it started, I can remember like one pivotal moment. It started with me having that conversation with myself and not shying away from the shit that was in my head or the things I was afraid to admit to or dive into. Like I had to sit there with myself and be like, okay, I have to acknowledge what's happening and then figure out how to ask for help.
Yeah.
Or how to ask to have that conversation with my loved ones.
Oh my God. I love that you say ask for help. There is no weakness in asking for help. Mm-hmm. And something that you said too, all conversations start with ourselves. And sometimes they involve other people. But we hold back. We believe context in our head. We make up stories. We believe them to be true. Sometimes the stories are true. A lot of times the shit isn't true. I mean, I think about like times that I was sad and depressed and I would sit in bed or sit on my sofa and I would make up all these fictitious stories and then I believe them to be true. And that's how I live my life. So, you know, when I think of like seconds and minutes and hours, days and weeks and months, I'm like, am I making good choices? Because how we spend that amount of time in our lives is how we're living our life. And I just did not want to live a shitty life. I don't want to live a shitty life. I still have to come back to myself every once in a while. Don't get it wrong. I got to check in with myself every once in a while. Today, I woke up in a sour mood. I told you about the story that on my plane and all this other stuff, and I woke up really sour. And then I had to go back and have a conversation with my partner, Kyle, and I had to apologize for some of my behavior. It's a choice. You know, if it is to be, then it's up to me. And I put my finger on my nose. I know that you might not be able to see this right now in the podcast, but I'm putting my finger on my nose. It says, if it is to be, then it's up to me. I make that choice. I make a really good effort to make that choice. And it's not always easy. It's not always easyที่to try to get out of my funk. I mean, I was just at that airport and I was chomping nails and just mad. And I thought, what's wrong with you? And you get down in there and sometimes you just got to pull your head out of your arse and say, okay, I'm going to stop this. And when you got a good partner that's with you, listen to them. I don't always listen to the person that I love. People that come to you and have good stuff, give them the space to listen. I have to be really cognizant of that. I got to listen to the people, you know, my partner in life that I walk with is not always what I think in my head against me. They're really with me. And how do we walk in this life together with really good conversations? It's not easy. It's not easy. Susan says another quote that I'm going to quote from her book. Hope you know, if you ever listen to this, Susan Scott, don't ever get mad because I am quoting you, my dear. She said, that which goes unspoken and undealt with normally comes back to haunt us as fate. And I'm like,
I got the goosebumps.
Do I just want fate to have, you know, I believe in destiny, I believe in karma, and I believe in all that. But I also have a control over how I show up and how I appear and what I'm doing. Success in love and relationships and at work is an accountability part on me too. We can push it off on somebody and say that the universe backed up and took a proverbial dump on us. Or we can look at it through different lenses and say, it feels a little dumpy. It smells a little dumpy. I'm going to make compost out of this and grow flowers. You know, it's lemons to lemonade. But it's still not always easy to the person that's there.
Yeah.
in that moment. And I want people to recognize that and understand that I'm not just saying that you just like a light switch turn on and off, but you can start gradually. You can start gradually with one conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Good conversations don't normally always just happen all at once. They happen gradually. And then suddenly you're like, hey, this isn't so bad, but it takes an effort.
Yeah.
And also takes like taking a big, deep breath before you say what you want to say, right?
Oh, don't go into it. Don't go into a conversation. Let me tell you, don't go into a conversation heated and mad and throwing grenades. Because when you do that and you've been amygdala hijacked, your limbic brain has literally taken your rational thinking. You're talking shit that goes on in your head. You're talking shit that's going on in your head, and that shit's coming out of your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly believe that. And I say that from me to everyone that's listening to this with a lot of love. Cool your jets. Watch out for your triggers. Tell people about your triggers. When you don't want to be triggered, tell people about your triggers. Kyle loves to tell me, calm down.
Oh, I am calm. Is that the response?
Stop it.
And like Linda Blair, if you don't know who Linda Blair is, look up Linda Blair. My head spins around and I'm like, what? Don't tell me to calm down. And he's all saying that from a loving standpoint. But words matter. Words matter in conversations too. I always say it's a conversation. Susan says that in her book. It's conversare, to associate with.
Mm-hmm.
Not versate. Don't versate at somebody, because if you're having versations, you're one-sided. It sounds like you're being fire hose, but if you invite somebody to talk with you, then the conversation is really better. And don't say things like calm down and be quiet. Just
or shut the fuck up and let me talk. Okay, because those are not.
We're on a hiatus from using that word.
Hey, it's not my hour to do that, okay? I set an hour a day to do that. It is not today.
Oh, man.
Sometimes it just feels good to say that word. You know, I just want people to know, if you're going through a hard time and you're struggling, find somebody that you love and trust. A fierce conversation is not cat scratching. It's not ugly. It's not mean. It's about love and respect and honesty and loyalty and the truth. It's about the truth. And sometimes the truth hurts. So don't be mad when the truth hurts. If you're having a conversation and the conversation stings a little bit, and you're like, damn, think about the reality. And if you got to step in front of the mirror and take a good look in the mirror, God knows I have. I wouldn't want to today. Look at my face. Look a little haggard. But sometimes we need to.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need to have a good realization. Is the problem me? Or is the problem someplace else? And that's accountability.
Yeah. It's like that metaphorical, like your dog earing that moment. That's usually like if me and my husband are getting into a tiff and he says something that triggers an emotional response in me, instead of, saying, shut the fuck up or whatever, I will kind of dog ear it. Like I need to come back to that and figure out what that's about. Because it's oftentimes not an attack or how I'm interpreting it or what he's saying necessarily, but there's something behind that part of the conversation that I need to revisit, figure out what's going on.
Yeah. I think about this even from not just a personal standpoint, but, at work, the conversation is the relationship. Susan says that in her book too. That's not a quote from me. That's from her. Our conversations are a lot of what our culture is in our organizations that we work in and the people that we work with. And if we're frustrated, it's not about saying that you did something wrong. It's about having the understanding around it. We're all diverse in thought. You got to think about so many things. I think about all the people that I work with around the world and people that I coach around the world and companies that I work with around the world. It's not just how we view and see things that's right. There's so many things that come into play with being right. Context and ethics and morals and values and religions and where you brought up and how you view the world, whether you were brought up, I'm sure Oprah Winfrey, look at Oprah Winfrey. She was brought up very poor and she's a billionaire now. How she views the world is differently than somebody who, Kardashian, no offense to you, Kim, if you're listening too, and I'm sure she is. that her life was a little different than somebody who grew up a different way. So context and how we're brought up. I think there's diversity of thought that needs to be brought in, but we should respect it all. One of the things, and I'm going to get very fierce for a moment.
You fierce? Never.
Can I be fierce? Can I be fierce with you? People say shit like perception is reality. I'm just like, oh, shut up. Perception is reality. I think that's the biggest bunch of bullshit that there is. If your perception is reality and you want to find out if it's reality, then you'll go and interrogate reality with the person that you're talking to. Meaning this, don't think that I'm doing something if you don't know. Don't make up a story in your head and believe it to be true. And if you really want to know the truth, have a fierce conversation with me. Ask me. Mm-hmm. Did I see you texting on your phone over there during the meeting? I saw you texting people and I saw you smiling and laughing. Well, I actually wasn't texting during the conversation. I was taking copious notes and I was smiling because all of it resonated with me. And I thought it was a powerful conversation. Do you see where perception and reality get a big disconnect? And a lot of times we live our lives, our personal lives, our professional lives, just around perception as reality. And I'm like, if you really want to know, go freaking ask. Go find out. I saw you texting. Were you texting and being crazy on your phone? No, boo. I was taking copious notes. Look, I got 16 pages and they're in an Excel spreadsheet that I can send to you afterwards. But I had a leader literally do that to me one time. And I was like, she goes, my perception is that you're not paying attention during this meeting. And that's the voice that I hear in my head. You know what I'm saying? My perception is that you're not paying attention. And I was like, well, your perception's wrong. And here's my notes. And I think about that in relationships too. Sometimes my perception of Kyle is not always the right Kyle that I have in my head. And then when I go and I talk to him, he's like, boo, that's not me. That's not what I was doing. And I was like, well, my perception that you were just being an ass. And he was like, boo, that wasn't being an ass. You know what I mean? Do you ever have that shit happen?
Yeah.
Yes.
All the time.
Yes.
Question, did Daryl ever do that to you?
What time is this at? I need to make sure because
5:59.
Okay.
And do you ever do that to her? And,
You mean Lisa the lesbian? Yeah. We do it all the time.
We all do that.
Yeah.
But I'm like, that needs to stop. That's where part of the problem, I think, is really beginning, is that we make up the stories, we believe it to be true, and then we never validate it.
And then sometimes we get passive aggressive in those conversations too, right?
Yeah. You had said something earlier.
I've never been passive aggressive ever in my life. I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
For me, there's one thing I know about myself. If I keep that bottled in and just interpret something and then just assume that's what it was, and I know that will aid in me developing resentment. And once I have resentment, that's a bad place for me. So I can't do that. I'm like, I will ask everybody anything.
I get that. And that's Susan's quote, that which goes unspoken normally comes back to haunt us as fate. That's fate. I'm here in South Florida. I saw a little gecko come in my apartment earlier. And I think, where the hell did you go? Because you're probably going to come back and hunt me as Godzilla at 3 a.m. I need to find this little part before it comes back. And I think, like, do I put it off and ignore it? Because it normally is going to come back to haunt me. And I think those are conversations and relationships that we have. We think that it's not a big deal. We sweep it under the carpet. We have all these things, these sayings, these beautiful sayings that have trickled down from generations to generations. It'll come out in the laundry. What's one that you've heard? Like, it'll all work its way out. It'll all come out. The yarn will unravel somewhere at the end, and then we'll make a sweater of it.
Yeah, it comes out, and then you've already made a grave mistake, either through doing the voice to text on your phone and accidentally hitting send.
Yes! And quit having conversations through text.
Yeah.
Don't have conversations through text and email. It's the worst part. That's awful. Mm-hmm. I sent a conversation the other night to a family member, and I was like, it was a long, I did my best to be very fierce and kind. And I literally got, and I literally got the K back. literally
Oh.
K. And that's the
One
worst. So
letter.
when I just did it to myself. I sent it. I should have had picked up the phone and had the conversation. I sent the text. I got a K back. And then I thought, oh my gosh. And then I was mad. Well, I didn't have the right conversation at the right space at the right time. Shame on me. I was part of that. I become an enabler to that bad conversation. And then I had to deal with it because for about 3 days, I was pissed off. What the F is wrong with you? You're the shit stirrer. And then I literally said, oh my God, they're such a shit stirrer. Well, were they the shit stirrer or was I? You know
I don't
what
know,
I mean?
because they replied back with K. Like, really? That's all you have to say is K?
I want to reach through the phone and grab their neck. I know that's awful to say, but I'm being candid in my response. And those are where conversations get ended.
So I have to ask you, is that conversation you had via text and what you wrote, is that something that you would actually say to their face? Because a lot of times we write shit in text or an email that you would never say to somebody's face.
Well, because we haven't grown the cojones to say it to their face. And I will tell you, probably yes, I would have from that text said it to their face. I just thought the text was an easier way to say it. And it wasn't. I think you're spot on. You know, sometimes anonymity from the standpoint of a text or an email gives us a little bit more power in our thoughts. But the person who's picking up and reading that message is reading it the way they hear it. So just like I made fun of my leader that said to me, are you looking at that? What are you doing over there? You're smiling and are you texting people? That's what I hear in my head. She probably did not say it that way. She probably said like, what are you doing over there? Are you texting? I see you smiling, but in my head, I hear the Wicked Witch of the West. Like, so we make that shit up. And to anyone, we're like, any conversation is emotionally charged. I truly believe that. But when we have those conversations that are in text and email, we'll add exclamation points and capitalization. Stop doing that too. Stop putting things in capitalization. But we put caps into things that don't even have caps on it. And you're like, exclamation point. And then that's how we respond. And I'm like, and have you ever had a conversation where somebody said, I just wanted to say, just wanted to give you my piece, my thought and story. And you're like, damn, well, why was I so mean?
I know.
Have you ever had that happen?
Yes. And then I'm always like,
you have to eat humble pie and you're embarrassed. And you're like, well, I thought you was being kind of rude or something.
Like, it can't possibly be me. Yeah.
No, that's exactly right. It can't be me because my context is right. All conversations are with myself, and sometimes they involve other people. And when you don't involve other people, Maslow's theory comes to play here. Self-actualization. We come up with things, we put them into action, we live them, we believe them, and therefore we are. That's what I say to people. Like, I'm not perfect. I don't know anybody who is. I won't be perfect tomorrow. But one of the things that I will tell you is that the guidance of Fierce Conversations has allowed me to course correct.
Yeah.
Highly effective people watch for trends and course correct before arriving at an undesired suddenly. And I still have them. I still have undesired suddenlies, but they're fewer and far between than what they were before. If you think that, reading a book or listening to this podcast is going to change the trajectory of your life without some type of self-actualization and behavioral change on your part, you're setting yourself up for failure. I want you to know that. I want you to hear me say that to you. It takes dedication. It takes being intentional, and it takes work. Working hard on yourself is hard. It's never easy. If it was easy, we would all be just living lives, right? But it's not. It takes a lot of work. There's going to be tough days and there's going to be bad days and there's going to be really good days. But I think that you can change the dichotomy of where that pendulum flows if you're awake. If you stay awake and you're intentional. And a good life deserves intention. Your good life on the shit that goes on in your head deserves intention. Meaning, yes, everyone's struggling and everyone deserves a moment to be down. I get it. But are you digging yourself up out of that? Are you dusting your knees off? I had a woman tell me one time, my mentor, she said to me in life, I am so far down in this cesspool of life. I am just choking on literally garbage. And she said, then pull yourself up out of that garbage. And she goes, and if you're looking for somebody to extend you in a hand, I'm here, but don't wait for it. Dig yourself out of that dumpster. Mm-hmm. And I was like, where were you? Where were you 14 years ago when I needed you? Sometimes people just need to hear yourself. It's going to be okay.
And do you think that those fierce conversations, that's a awesome example of like self-care and self-love? That is taking care of yourself.
Yes. Because if you don't take care of yourself, listen, I sat on a plane today and I listened to the Southwest airline flight attendant. Cute as a button he was. And he said, if you're with a child, you put your oxygen mask on first before assisting other people. To be fierce, you have to put your oxygen mask on first. And if you want to be fierce and help other people, it has to be on their terms. You can't coach somebody who doesn't want to be coached. You can't love somebody who doesn't want to be loved. You can't inspire somebody who doesn't want to be inspired. Pick and choose your battle. Stop wasting time on people who don't want to have the goodness that you're going for. And sometimes that means severing relationships for now. Doesn't mean that they can't be cultivated and grown back. But I've had to say to people before in my life, even through fierce conversations, come back to me when you're ready. I'm here. I'm here. I'm ready. But I can't do this anymore. And that's how fierce these can be. You know, you got to there's self-preservation, and I believe in that, but don't let it be a one-sided self-preservation where you just cocoon yourself or you armor up for battle against people, armor up for your goodness to people. There's a difference. I'm going into battle in this conversation. I'm ready to be fierce. Well, you're doing it the wrong way, boo. Armor up to be kind and gentle and good and caring. That's the good armor that you want to have. Anybody can be nasty and gross and mean. We can all do that. That's easy. But when we dig down below the surface of what's infecting us and the relationship, and we course correct, and that's where the power of potential lies. But I do believe that sometimes relationships need to be severed. They need to be ended. Doesn't always mean that it's bad. It just means I've chosen to go my way and I wish you well and I love you. But maybe I don't like you. My mom said that to me one time. She told me, she said to me, she goes, Regent, I love you so much. And this was that a cantankerous time in our lives. And I remember her saying, I love you so much. I will always be here for you. But today I do not like you. And it's okay not to be liked in that moment. But if you want a relationship to be lasting, you want a work relationship to be lasting, then put in the effort to make it last. If it is to be, then it's up to me. It really is.
Yeah. And you have to have those conversations. Otherwise, what are we doing? Yeah. There's something you said where it's like, is this how I want to live my life? Is this how I want to spend my time and my energy? And if the relationship is worth it, then you have that conversation.
Yeah.
And you put the work in.
Out of Seattle, they have Pike's Place Fish Market. So here's a little plug for Susan and Seattle. I'm really plugging Seattle today. Pike's Place Fish Market. You ever been?
Mm-hmm.
You ever gone there?
Yeah, I have not.
They play, they have fun. But there is a philosophy. It says, choose your attitude, make their day, play and have fun. And these people who schlep ice around and stinky fish, this man, there was a guy on a video and he was like, yeah, I get up. He sounded like he smoked like 12 packs of cigarettes in a day. I get up and I work at 4 a.m. and I schlep ice all around and I deal with stinky fish, but every day I choose my attitude. And I'm like, that's what I want to be around. Like, that's where I want to embrace my life. My dad used to say to me, and God rest his soul, he's been gone for 5 years, but I hear his voice emphatically in my head. He said that if you lay with dogs, you're going to get fleas. Pick your pack.
I love that.
And that's what I try to do every day. I love just about everyone. There's some people that I, unfortunately, that love relationship isn't there. But the majority of the people I try to love and give kindness and grace. Gretchen, I always think of Greg Toronto. And Greg Toronto, if you ever listen to this podcast, I'm giving a shout out to you. And he said this, and I listened to him as a mentor to him. He said, Regent, just err on the side of grace. And that will help you with your conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. That's like my favorite word. You got to give not only other people grace, but yourself grace. I love it.
Yeah. Wow. What an awesome conversation in just such a short time period. You all are mad unicorns. Charlene, they don't call you Skittles for nothing, girl.
I know, right? Yeah, I can't believe we're here. I mean, thank you, Regent. This has been, I will fangirl after this. I'm going to go upstairs to tell my husband, I just have to talk to Regent.
Are you going to ask me any of your crazy questions?
I do.
Oh, God,
you ready?
Ask away.
Okay. Inside the actor studio.
I will make up something.
No, these are like the brain tingly ones. So, Regent today, Regent now.
Yeah.
If you could go back in time to a younger version of yourself and give yourself a fierce conversation, what would you say? And at what age would you travel back to?
It's so funny. I had something come up on my Facebook the other day. It was me in Honduras, and I did a little stint with a wellness program in Honduras where we inoculated kids. And I see this little boy who is 18 years old, and he's feeding a monkey. And I said I would whisper in his ear, be fierce, go into it brave, and never have any remorse and regret. I had not come out at that time. I'm proudly gay. I am who I am. I was suffering at that time, but I would tell that young man in that picture as I looked at it and whisper in his ear, be your true, authentic self, and carpe diem, seize the day. I think I seized the day. I think sometimes I was scared of seizing the day, but damn, I probably would have seized it even more. I just would have taken life by the cojones and just did. And I think I did a darn good job back then too, with what I had and where I had it. But man, when I wrap my arms around him and just give him love, things were different back then coming out. This is back in 1990. AIDS was at its highest.
Wait, you're gay? I had no idea. You're gay? I had no idea.
Oh, girl, please. I open up my mouth and a purse falls out. What the hell? But I would tell that young man, just stand proud and strong. And I think I have, but I would have whispered that in his ear and gave him even more inspiration to be as good as he could be. And I think I've done a pretty darn good job in my life, but I would have really wrapped my arms around him and loved him hard.
Yeah. What lesson are you looking forward to learning in the future?
God, what retirement feels like. Fuck.
Yeah. Do you have plans?
Oh, I do. I have big plans. I don't think I'll ever retire. I just think that we all need to be challenged and stimulated. I have so much that I have a book that needs to be written. I am a PCC. I'm a coach. I'm a life coach. You can find me on LinkedIn. You want to talk to me? I'm a PCC. I want to coach people in their life journey. I want to coach people in their professionalism. Right now with my full-time job, it doesn't always allow me to do that, but I want to be that when I grow up. And I want to do that at a pace that's sustainable to me. I feel like sometimes I have my foot on the gas pedal going about 100 miles an hour, and I'm ready to take that down to at least 95. Just a little. 5 miles makes a difference. You ask any speed
It sure
officer.
does.
Ask a policeman. Ask a police officer. 5 miles makes a difference.
Right. It sure does. G-Rex, you want to ask your infamous, what do you do for self-care?
So my question for you, Regent, is what do you do for self-care and self-love on a daily basis?
I believe in writing things down of gratitude. I have a notebook And I've got one here, and you're not seeing it on film, but I have one here. And I write down things of gratitude every day that I'm happy for. Sometimes I miss a day. Sometimes, most of the time I don't, but I write things down that I'm really happy and grateful for. I work out. There is cortisol in our body. Get it out of your system. Work out. Even if you go for a 30-minute walk or a 15-minute walk, get off your arse and get the shit out of your head and go for a walk. Eat healthy, drink water, and just be kind. I try to find myself being kind to someone. Even today, the woman at the airport, the flight person rearranged my flight. She did it. And then I walked back up to the counter and I said, afterwards, I was getting on my flight and I said, thank you so much for just treating me kind and getting me back on this flight because I had screwed up my flights. And she goes, no problem. She goes, hardly anybody comes back up and says thank you like that again. And I thought, well, okay, I'm a little different. I'm a different bird. Be the different bird. Be that person. Stop doing random acts of kindness and paying for coffee for people behind you. Take coffee to a homeless person. Do something random act of kindness for somebody who really needs it instead of behind you. There's nothing wrong with buying somebody coffee behind you. I mean, I get that. I want to sound like a curmudgeon, but do a random act of kindness outside of the scope of somebody who might need it as opposed to somebody who really desperately needs it.
Yeah. I love that.
Love
you, Regent.
We love you.
Oh my God, I love you too.
We needed this.
I know.
Hi, all. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I'm G-Rex.
And I'm Dirty Skittles.
Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. We'd love to listen to your feedback.
We can't do this without you guys.
It's okay to be not okay. Just make sure you're talking to someone.